When I was in secondary school, I was a well-behaved child. I was quite academic for the school I was in, probably one of the more academic kids, and I did like to be good. But I had this keen sense of justice, and I still remember the day it got me suspended from secondary school. We were standing outside a maths class, and there was another class waiting outside as well for their teacher. And my maths teacher came along, and someone from the other class threw a coin, and it hit him in the back of the head. Well, he wasn't very happy about it. He brought us in and demanded that we tell him who did it. And we couldn't because it genuinely wasn't anyone from our class. It came from the other group. And we did try to tell him that, but he didn't believe us. So he decided he wasn't going to teach us any more maths, but he was still going to give us our test that Friday. We were somehow to teach ourselves these complicated maths concepts so that we could do the test. So over the next few days as a class, we agreed that if he wasn't going to teach us, we weren't going to do the test. So test day comes around and nobody takes out their pens or their pencil cases, and he's getting agitated and he asks what's going on. And eventually somebody says, it might even have been me, I can't remember, we're not doing a test basically because you wouldn't teach us. Well, he was very, very unhappy and he was going mad and saying that he was going to suspend a lot of us. And one by one, everyone gave in and started taking out their pencil cases to do the test until it was just me and two of the other girls who didn't do the test. And all three of us were, in fact, suspended. I'd never as much gotten a no home from school, never mind being suspended. But I just couldn't let it go at the time. I just couldn't cope with the injustice of it. I had to follow through on what I said I was going to do. Now, I'm not telling you this story to be all like, hey, look at me. I'm telling you because that 15-year-old me had no platform, no business, nothing to gain. She wasn't building a brand. She just couldn't stay sitting on her hands when something she felt was wrong was happening. And I'm still that way. But there can be a darker or, let's say, less helpful side of that when we're working in this industry. And I think it's genuinely doing real harm. And here's what I mean. So standing up for what you believe in isn't wrong, okay? But it doesn't have to be controversial and doesn't have to induce fear. Those are two different things. And in this episode, I want to show you the difference. So hello and welcome back to the Pregnancy and Postnatal Entrepreneurs Collective podcast. I'm your host, Niamh Cassidy, antenatal teacher, IBCLC, and business and mindset coach to birth and postpartum workers. And today I want to talk to you about something that sits right in the heart of how I run my business and in how I coach the people that I work with. And it's this: I will speak my truth all day long, but I don't court controversy. I do the first one, I don't do the second one. And I don't push anyone else towards the second one either. Now, this is about my values. I'm not saying that everyone has to believe the same as me or have the same values as me or see things in the same way as me. But a lot of my clients do tend to be people who are somewhat similar in nature. They may not be as vocal or expressive about some things as I am, or they might be more so, and that's completely okay. It's not an issue at all. But this episode is about how I speak my truth without the courting controversy part, and more importantly, why I think that matters so much in our industry specifically. Because let's face it, we're not selling handbags here, we're working with pregnant people and new parents, and that is a really important nuance that we have. But to understand why I feel so strongly about this, I need to tell you a little bit more about my background and where I come from, because I didn't start out my career in birth work or anything like it. Before any of this, I was a professional social care worker. I spent much of my working life in institutions and detention schools for kids and homeless and housing services, and later managing a family resource centre. But human rights and justice have always been really, really important to me in my personal life and my work. And it goes right back to my childhood. Me and my mum would have had conversations at the kitchen table. I grew up in the 80s when there was a lot of poverty and a lot of social change was happening. So there would be a lot of talk about, people on welfare and different things like that. But we would talk about the nuance of it. We'd talk about how everybody was a human and why human rights were important and why nobody was better than anyone else, but also about why, some people might have these opinions that they have because of the background of where they're coming from. So what I'm trying to say is that I grew up with a really, really strong sense of justice, of right and wrong, and a really strong sense of human rights. And when I went to college, I chose to do social care, and I later did a master's in criminology as well. So I have this natural instinct towards justice, but also a theoretical grounding and a lived practical experience, because I've worked with people who are disadvantaged in extreme ways, people who are homeless, people navigating substance abuse, people in the criminal justice system, people whose kids have been taken into care, ex-care leavers who are now homeless. And I say all of this not to list out this mad CV for you, but because I'm just trying to show you why I care about this so much. Because when you spend your working life beside people who were failed by systems, who were talked down to, who were frightened into making decisions for them and their families, you develop a really low tolerance for anyone using fear as a tool, because fear is used as a tool of control for disadvantaged people. And even in other work, sometimes people feel that they're using it for people's own good, but that really isn't always the way. Now, just hold on to that for a minute, because I want to give you an example so this doesn't stay too abstract. Because sometimes it becomes hard to tell the difference between someone courting controversy just for the sake of it, for popularity, for likes, for money, versus someone who either just has a strong conviction in their beliefs, or maybe someone who's just plain arrogant and can't even believe that someone else could be right and then be wrong. So there is a person in the space, a medical professional with a podcast and a big following, who I think kind of will help me give an example of this pattern. And I'm not going to name them, because who they physically are isn't actually important, and I'm not here courting controversy, but it's just to kind of, so I can use something as an example to show the pattern of what happens. So this person is genuinely well liked by a lot of parents. The parents may have had a sick child who this person has cared for, or who they have even saved this child's life. And that part is real, but they do consistently step outside their own professional lane to talk about things like birth and pregnancy and lactation, areas that are not really their primary field. And they can often present their opinions as fact, and also try to use their authority to, say that they're right. They also like to step into other people's content and tell doulas, lactation consultants, antenatal educators that they're wrong. And as you can imagine, that's not quite so popular with most birth workers. But what they do in court and controversy and in kind of calling people out works, because they speak to the feelings a lot of parents already have, like the mummy war stuff. So like breast versus formula, epidural, no epidural, home birth, hospital birth. And they frame it in a way that only what they say is right, and that the people who are challenging them are wrong. But not only that they're wrong, that they're bad, that they are doing it for their own business, whereas we see it actually happening with this person themselves. Now, I'm going off on a tangent here, but here's why the pattern matters, and here's the harmful part. When you present your opinion as fact, especially when you have a huge audience, that's not okay. So what I'm really against in this instance is kind of saying the thing that's probably going to be the most popular thing just to get likes, but upsetting other birth workers and maybe plenty of parents as well along the way, just for the sake of it, just to be popular, just to grow your following. So the intent behind it is important, but also the execution is important. Now, what I don't want you to think as I'm saying this is that you should never say anything controversial, or you should never talk out of line, whatever that might be, that you should keep your head down and never say anything that might be interpreted or upset anybody. That's not what I'm saying. I don't shy away from the things that matter to me in my birth and lactation work. Not at all. I talk about informed decision making. I make reels that might be seen as a little bit controversial about like not listening to doctors, or why I didn't listen to the doctor when they told me that I should have a hospital birth because I wanted to have a home birth, and different things like that. So like a lot of my content does sit in that space. I might talk about how hospital guidelines aren't the law. I might talk about how people can get their notes and what they can do, about how hospitals aren't prison. And all of that might seem slightly controversial, but it's not courting controversy for the sake of it. So yes, that might seem controversial to some people, particularly by people like medical professionals that I just described, and by some parents who feel that you should listen to what the professionals say because obviously they know best. But here's the difference in what I do and what I see some other people doing, the type of people that I think are actually causing harm. Every single time I post content like that, I anchor it in informed decision making. So I talk about how important it is to have all the information before you make a decision, that as grown adults we're allowed to make our own decisions, even ones that might turn out bad for us or good for us, that two people with almost identical histories can make completely different medical decisions. Both of them might be right because there's very rarely only one good decision, in particular in birth and postpartum decision making. So I always caveat it a little bit like that. So I'm never saying don't listen to your doctor or doctors are bad, because I don't believe that. I would never say that. What I'm saying is get all the information you need and then you make the decision that's best for you. So that is me speaking my truth, but not me courting controversy for controversy's sake, because I'm not trying to frighten anyone. I'm not trying to give someone a really strong direction. I'm handing them information and context and then trusting them with it. So let's bring this right up now to something that's going on at the moment, or has been going on for the last few months and is playing out in the media still as we speak. And I'm going to use the example to show you the different ways that controversy can be used in a negative way by everybody involved. So what I'm going to talk about is the topic of free birth, and within that the topic of hospital birth as well. So let's look at free birth and everything that's been going on in the media and the fear that the media likes to create around it. So free birth is on the rise all over the world, and here in Ireland and across in the UK there have been a lot of headlines about it because there have been some deaths associated with. If you're working alone in clients' homes, there's something you need to think about, and most birth workers aren't thinking about it yet. I spent 10 years visiting people's homes without incident, but I had training most birth workers don't have. And I realised recently that I couldn't keep that information to myself. I just created a safety guide for birth and lactation workers. It's practical, it's free, and it'll take you 2 minutes to read. You can download it at yourbirthbiz.com/safety or find it in the show notes. Because when you work for yourself, you're the only one responsible for keeping yourself safe. So make sure you do. Free births in Ireland, very sadly, a woman died during a free birth after having previous cesareans. And even though that woman had a free birth because she could not get the National Health Service here to support her in her home birth desires, the media likes to focus on blaming her and other people who've had free births who have died or whose babies have died, on blaming them for what happened to them. And part of it, what the media does is that they blame the women, and then they're focusing really, really heavy on the online free birth movement, justifiably in some cases. You know, some of the figureheads of the big international companies are making a great deal of money, and you know, I don't believe there's anything wrong in making money, but when you're using frightening messaging to scare people out of medical care that might save their lives, then we have a problem. So when people are heavily pushing the idea that you shouldn't seek medical advice ever, you shouldn't do anything a doctor tells you, and that if the worst does happen, well, that's just what was meant to happen, I fundamentally reject that premise. Can things go wrong in birth no matter where you give birth? Yes, they can. It doesn't justify using awful, dangerous messaging, and the media pushing back against some of that dangerous messaging is real, and you know, in lots of ways I agree with it, but the media does the exact same thing. They're running their content on fear. So they're talking about reckless women dying at home, and you know, that these terrible people are influencing these poor women who don't know how to make their own decisions, rather than looking at maybe the causes of why some people choose free birth. And for a lot of them, it's not because it's their dream idea to give birth alone. They choose it because they can't get anything else. They can't afford a private midwife, or home birth isn't legal or available where they live, or they've been risked out of a service that does exist. And it also, the media here conveniently leaves out that people die giving birth in hospital too. So we have the media creating this fear about, what women's choices are doing, and also about the people who might be supporting free birth in some way. So that's one side of it. Now, here's the other part, because what's also happening in the media at the moment, and what's been happening very prominently in the UK, is that there have been these big investigations into the maternity and neonatal services launched because there's been scandal after scandal. So they've done independent reviews, and the regulator has found that poor care had become normalised, and that the failures were widespread throughout the National Health Service in the UK and not just a few bad units. So there may be hundreds or more of babies and mothers' cases that may have been preventable. So this is another real story, but this one's systemic. It's an enormous story. It's what has been happening, and it's what has been happening inside the hospitals. So we have to ask, why is there so much noise being pointed at frightened women birthing at home instead of the systemic failures that are happening in hospital care? And while obviously the media is talking about this, they talk about it in a completely different way to the way they talk about doulas supporting free births or women who choose free births. So they're not using this information to try and scare women from attending hospital. They're just using it, to damn the maternity services, which is fine. That's what they do. But here's where we come in, because it's not just the media, and I want you to stay with me for a minute, because it is the whole point of this episode, and I just needed to kind of talk about that in the background to give context. Because those hospital reports and everything about free birth get handled differently in two completely different ways by birth workers as well, not just the media. And there are loads of brilliant birth workers doing the right thing with the information on the hospital reports. They're breaking them down, they're explaining clearly what they actually mean for pregnant and postnatal families. They're talking about the improvements that need to be made in the services. They're giving people information and context, and that is exactly right. That is the job. This is the content that I love to see from other birth workers. And then there are some birth workers who take those very same facts, real facts, true facts, but they weaponize them into fear. Hospitals are dangerous. This is why you want a free birth. This is why you have to do my class. Full stop. No nuance. No acknowledgement that both a hospital birth and a supported home birth and a truly informed free birth can be completely reasonable choices when the person has the right information to make an informed decision. So the facts are the same. The maternity services can be terrible. Home births can go wrong, but it's what people are doing with them. And that's what I want you to try and reflect on here, because it should never be about hospital versus home or versus free birth. It should never be about which side is right. The tell isn't the topic. The tell is whether the people consuming this information are being informed or frightened. You can take a true fact and use it to inform someone, or you can take that same fact and use it to scare them. And in this industry, a lot of what gets dressed up as speaking out, I believe, is the second one. And I see more and more people leaning into that as well. And that is using fear. And I'm just not down with that. The media does a good enough job of scaring the out of parents without us joining in as well. But there are people here in our world whose entire business model is built on courting controversy and selling fear. But there is someone that I'm thinking about who does exactly all the things that I really don't like. They were a registered midwife, they are now a birth keeper, and they have a very large following. But here's the thing I want you to think about, and if you know who the person is, it's not about any judgment on them. It's that their business is no longer built on attending births. They may name themselves as a birth keeper, but in practice, that is not what they do. It's built on the platform. It's built on speaking, on media, on their following. Their income isn't coming from supporting parents through the births anymore. It's coming from the controversy. It's coming from other birth workers. It's coming from media. It's coming from the audience. Now, I'm not sure with people like this whether it's done just for the notoriety or the fame, or whether they truly believe every word. Probably it's a bit of both, but either way, I want you to just look at the model clearly, because it gets sold to you as aspirational. Look how big they got, look how much money they're making. But the bit they don't mention is that they got big by leaving the actual work. And that's completely different to the business that most of you are trying to build in supporting parents. But if we do look at it purely as a business decision for a minute, because this is a business podcast and I don't want you to think I'm being naive. A lot of business people, good ones, smart ones, teach that controversy sells. And they're not wrong. It does. It will 100% get you more followers, more shares, or more reach. That part is true. I saw a post recently that at first I was shocked that a woman was teaching, and then I thought she was being sarcastic. I thought it was a joke, but by the end I realized she wasn't. And it started with fudge writing a good hook. These are guaranteed to get you attention online. And then went on to tell people to show off their money like it's not important, or to pay to go in a big mastermind and just take pics and document it all so you look important, and to say this really, really unpopular opinion and all of these different things. Now, she did say that she doesn't necessarily condone these things, just that they work. And a lot of people aren't teaching about instilling fear in the same way that it works. And maybe it works for some industries. In fact, I'm sure it does. And in birth work, as I said, it'll probably work to get you more reach or more followers. But here's what the people who teach this crap skip over. More reach and more followers is not more clients. The people that controversial content tends to pull in are very often not your clients. They're people who had a baby years ago and are still angry about how it went. They're other professionals who want to agree with you or just argue with you. They're people who just like a fight on the internet in the comments. That's engagement, but those people are not necessarily going to book you. They're not going to hand over money for your services. They never were. And then we'll hear people say, but controversy scares away the people who are never going to be your clients anyway. But I want to push back a bit on that, because think about who our clients actually are. Most people who are pregnant or breastfeeding or in those early postpartum weeks, they're not people with big, loud, controversial opinions. They're ordinary, middle-of-the-road people. They're tired. They're a bit scared. They're a bit anxious. They just want someone who's calm and safe and competent. So when you build your whole online presence on being provocative, being controversial for clicks, these ordinary parents in your community, they might watch your content. Maybe they might even like it, but they won't necessarily feel safe with you. And so they don't hire you. Now, there is an exception, and I want to be fair about it. If someone deliberately wants to serve a very small, specific cohort and charge a premium for it, that is a completely valid business. There's absolutely nothing wrong with that. And for that person, a strong, pointed personal brand might be exactly the right strategy. But they've usually built a serious personal brand first over the years before those clients come. So they've done more of the general clients, and then they specify into something more specific. And as well, I also want to be fair about the other side, that people do grow. So as your business evolves, you might move on from purely hands-on work with families, and that's okay. You might decide to run an agency or go more into speaking or writing books or teaching other birth workers or whatever it might be. That is completely fine. I'm not telling anyone that they can't do that, and I actively support people who do. And maybe having really strong, controversial, fear-based opinions in doing some of that will serve you. But if what you want is to actually serve the ordinary mums and dads in your own community, the real hands-on work, then chasing controversy for likes and notoriety and a following is probably not the thing that's going to get you booked. It might get you seen, but it won't necessarily get you chosen. So when someone I coach says to me, I heard that controversy is a good way to build my Instagram, what do you think? My answer is honestly quite simple. Does it work? Yes. Is it for me? No. And here's why. And that here's why is really what this whole episode is about. And that is these two main things. The first one that matters most to me is that nearly all controversial content in our industry, when you really look at it, is built on fear. It scares pregnant and postpartum people. It scares them about going into the hospital. It scares them about having a home birth. It scares them about breastfeeding. It scares them about not breastfeeding. It scares them about getting an epidural. It scares them about not getting an epidural. Whatever the topic, the mechanism is the same. Make the person afraid and you've got their attention, and then maybe you can sell them something. I think that is the last thing that we should be doing to this particular group of people, because there is already more than enough fear to go around when you're pregnant or you've just had a baby. It's the same trick that's used to sell all the safety gadgets that parents don't need. Frighten a new parent, then sell them the solution. Just because fear works doesn't make it right. And I don't want any part of it. I honestly can't think of much controversial content in our space that isn't at its root fear-based. So for me, those things have basically become the same. When it's fear-based, it's wrong. Just to reiterate, that doesn't mean that we don't talk about the problems within the maternity systems or elsewhere. It just means how we talk about it, and the language we use and how we frame it is important. Because at the heart of it, we got into this to make things better for pregnant and postnatal people, not to frighten them for a bigger audience or even to make money. And the second thing, the one I really want you to walk away with, is this. You don't have to do it. You don't have to court controversy to be successful. I know it makes a lot of you really uncomfortable anyway, and I know some of you feel like you have to do it, like it's the price of building a business in this space. But I'm here to tell you it isn't. You can be a fully ethical, moral birth worker and a successful business person. Those two things are not in conflict. They never were. They actually work really good together, because the very thing that makes you ethical is the thing that makes the clients feel safe enough to choose you. You don't have to scare people to build a business. In fact, in our industry, refusing to scare people might be the most powerful business decision you ever make. I've built a successful birth business without doing it. My clients have built successful businesses without doing it. And many of my friends and colleagues and people who I've just know from Instagram and the internet have built successful birth businesses without doing it. They may not be the loudest people, but they're there in the background doing the work and making good income. So to sum up, speak your truth, really do, but remember the impact of your words on the people you want to serve. You can be honest, annoyed, angry even, without courting controversy for clicks, without ever needing to frighten anyone to do it. And you can build a successful business along the way. Thank you so much for listening. If this landed with you, if you were nodding along, I'd genuinely love to hear from you. Or if you disagree with me, I'd love to hear from you too. The best place to reach me is over on Instagram, so come and slide into my DMs and tell me what you thought. I do read them all. And if you know another birth or lactation worker who needs to hear this, maybe someone who's been feeling under pressure to be louder or more provocative than they want to be, please share this episode with them. It might be exactly what they needed to hear. And if you have a moment, leaving a review really does help other people find the podcast, and it really means a lot to me as well. So thank you again for being here. I'll talk to you all again soon.